You know, there is something really classic about these old 80s and 90s Ford truck screw-on center caps. They just scream bullnose, brick nose, OBS. When you see them on a truck, you know that's an old school Ford truck. And I just really like the look of them. And yeah, you know, Dodge and Chevy had their kind of versions, but really these right here, that's just Ford DNA right there, and I really love them. As a matter of fact, I like them enough that in my current builds that I'm doing with the Bronco, and I think even the F-150, I'm gonna use these kind of caps for those trucks, but they do have a problem. Howdy folks, Ed here. Welcome back to Bullnose Garage. And the problem with these center caps, as cool as they are, is that, like I said before, they're screw-on. There is actually no way to retain these caps onto a rim except for screwing them on. And now the old school Ford rims, like this guy right here, you'll see has screw holes. There's one right there, one right there, and one right there, right? But these Bassett racing rims do not. And as a matter of fact, almost all aftermarket rims are not going to have the necessary screw holes to put these center caps on there, and there is really no other way to put these center caps on. So if you want to do that, you got to do what I did here, which is drill holes into these aftermarket rims, just like these Bassett racing rims right here. And I'm going to show you exactly how to do that. It's actually not that hard, but there are some things you want to pay attention to just to make sure you get things lined up correctly, because these wheels do spin pretty fast. If you get things out of whack, they'll wobble. So just to give you an idea, here's one that I've done already. I got my 3 holes already drilled and tapped right there, and this one I haven't done yet. So I will go through the process and show you exactly how to drill and tap some aftermarket wheels to fit those kind of caps. One thing you want to make sure of when you're looking at aftermarket wheels like this, if you're going to use these kind of caps, is that they actually fit. These Bassets just happen to be perfect. They are absolutely perfect. So I will give you measurements for all of these things, the hole sizes, all of the widths here, the widths and stuff, so that you know exactly what you're looking for when you're looking for aftermarket wheels. Now, not all aftermarket wheels are going to give you these measurements here, but you know, you'll at least with some measurements, you'll have some ammunition to try to find the right aftermarket wheels. Anyway, let's go ahead and get started. Here we got a pretty good top-down view of my Bassett wheel, and you can see how this is going to align onto here. Now you could eyeball this and then, you know, punch your holes and do it that way, but you know, there's actually a little bit of wiggle right here, even with the obvious holes kind of being lined up. Now, because this is a Bassett rim, I got to use 45-degree conical seat lug nuts, open-ended, so that's what I'm using here. But you see, if I put that in there, right, there's still, even without moving the nut, I can still wiggle this around quite a bit. And that's going to be enough to potentially make it look funny while it's going down the road, or maybe even throw off the balance just a little bit, although with the plastic ones, there's probably not much of an issue. Okay, so here's how you deal with that. You've got to make sure that these are centered perfectly on this rim. Now, to do that properly, we're going to have to mount it onto the vehicle. But before we do that, I'm going to show you exactly what I use to kind of get it there to begin with. So what I've got, my handy-dandy digital caliper here, is I have some of these round rubber spacers, and I can put a link to the description where I got these. And these are exactly, let me change the inches here, right at 1 inch. They're right at 1 inch wide, and they're right at just under ½ an inch in the middle, which is what you want for the lug. But the 1 inch is not big enough to fill this space in here. Now you could go, I think it's 1 1/4, let me verify. If you can find 1 1/4 versions of those, then let's see what we got here. So it's not quite 1 1/4, it's 1.18 inches, which is, yeah, 30 millimeters. So of course it is. So I couldn't find exactly one of these that would fit right in the center here and be tight. So what I ended up doing was I cheated and got some duct tape or Gorilla Tape, and I put it around the outside and wound it around just enough to where it fit perfectly inside of here. So you can see that. And now what that's gonna do is it's gonna make sure that this is completely centered when I get this on the vehicle and on all my lugs. All right, now for this part, you need, of course, your wheel, your vehicle, and then 3 out of 5 of your lug nuts, your spacers, and your center cap, and a good solid punch. Mount your wheel up. Get 3 of your nuts on. The right direction. Now you're doing this because you want to make sure that the wheel is centered, and the lug nuts are going to center your wheel on your hub. Unless you're using hub-centric aftermarket wheels, which are not typical, but if you are, then you want to get that part centered instead of doing it this way. But either way, you want to make sure that your wheel is centered the way that it's going to be as you're going down the road. Now, I'm not torquing these down or tightening them up all the way. I'm just making sure that they center this wheel as much as possible, just to make sure it doesn't move. Now, we get our center cap on there. And it looks pretty good, and just to be 100% sure, I'll pop the spacers in. They are pretty tight, which is what you want. And these are going to make sure that this thing does not move whatsoever while it's in this spot. Now, like I was saying, there's enough play around these lug nuts that you can't really use them to center this. That's what these little plugs here are for. And by doing 3 and 2, this keeps this in a good spot right here where it's not really going to move. So now that's exactly where it's going to be. We can take our punch and make our marks. Now, this is a little bit of eyeballing because you kind of want to get right in the center of this hole if you can. I don't really have a method to make sure I'm right in the center, but there are ways to do that. Now, yeah, you could technically punch these marks on a bench, but here's the problem. The wheel and cap might look centered sitting on the table, but that doesn't mean that they're actually centered around the lug pattern. Now I got 2 of the 4 done already. This is my 3rd one. I'm gonna grab the 4th and then finish them up. When you bolt the wheel to the truck and use your spacers, everything's locked in exactly where it lives in the real world. The cap sits dead center on the hub, and your lug holes are perfectly aligned around all 5 studs. See, that's what keeps the cap from ending up just a hair off, where one screw's tight, another one's crooked, and the whole thing looks just a little wonky once it's spinning. Doing it on the truck just guarantees it's true to the actual geometry of your lugs, not eyeballed off the bench. It does take a few extra minutes, but it's worth it to get that perfect fit. All right, time to drill and tap our wheels to accept the screws. Now, these screws are 1/4 20. That's what came with my caps that I bought off of Amazon. I think most of them are 1/4 20, but I'm not 100% sure exactly what all of them are. So because these are 1/4 20, I'm using a number 7 drill bit. That's out of this Warrior 60-piece set from Harbor Freight. You can also use a 13 64ths drill bit, but number 7 is the correct one that you want to use if you're doing this to spec. So when you're drilling steel, I always like to use some tap or drilling fluid. Just get it right there in the little indent. You don't need very much, and then you can start drilling. So the key to drilling through metal like this is just slow, steady pressure with some good cutting fluid. Now, of course, if you got a drill press, you might be able to do this depending on the size of the drill press. I'm not sure. With these wheels, it probably would be kind of strange, but I don't have a drill press, so. All right, now that you got your holes drilled, it's time to tap. Make sure you get all your swarf out of here. Keeping the holes clean makes a big difference when you're doing your tap. All right. Now, like I said, this is 1/4 20 for these screws. So just put a little bit of cutting fluid on my tap. Again, this is a tap and die set from Harbor Freight. I go to Harbor Freight for a lot of my stuff. It works okay. It's not the best, but it's also not the worst. Try to get as straight as you can, although it doesn't have to be perfect. You want to make sure that you stop and back out every so often. That way you're getting all your swarf out of the threads here. Nothing to ruin your day faster than breaking off a tap because you got too much junk in your holes here. That sounds like a "that's what she said" joke, but I don't think it quite fits. There we go. All right, that works. I know, it's tedious and a little nerve-wracking if you've got expensive wheels, but there's something really satisfying about drilling those holes and cutting threads by hand, especially if you don't do machine work every day. You can feel the metal, you know when it's biting right, and doing it yourself means you know exactly how deep those screws go and how much thread engagement you've got. There's no guessing, no surprises when you bolt it up later. One of the things that I love about these old screw-on Ford caps is just how mechanical they are. Everything today just snaps together. Plastic clips, press fits, it's like there's no real craftsmanship anymore. But back in the 80s, man, Ford actually threaded these holes in the wheels for those little screws. Totally overbuilt, but that's what makes it cool. You can tell they weren't chasing assembly speed, they were building something meant to last. At least on the wheels. I wish I could say the same for the door panel clips. Those things bust off if you look at them sideways. But hey, that's part of the charm of working on old trucks like this, right? At least, that's what I tell myself. All right, all done. Now we can take them out and mount them and see how they look. All right, guys, so when I did my test fit, one of the things that I noticed is that these screws stick out too far behind the rim, and they actually touch the, there you go, you can see it right there. They actually touch the rotor on my axle. So I'm going to have to trim these screws. What I'm going to use, I'm just going to use a bench grinder, grind them down, and then I can use my tap and die set to rethread them, and we'll be just fine. All right, now you guys are going to think I'm crazy, but I just so happen to have some of these wing nuts here, and they are the right size to fit these screws. And I have found, and it's a little tedious, but I have found that if I screw this in here real nice and tight so it doesn't move, the amount of screw that I got sticking out the other end is almost exactly as much as I want to take off. So I just get it in there nice and tight, turn on my grinder, take it off. And the nice thing is that this wing nut also acts as a chaser, so when I pull the thread out, or pull the screw out, it rethreads the screw and it just goes right in. So. Sometimes there's a little burr on the end of there that I gotta trim off. But yeah, once this cools down, it should go right in. There we go, all trimmed up. Now guys, I gotta be honest, I am not a fan of these open lug nuts. I just like the way they look. So I'm gonna cheat and put some regular, just black lug nuts on the outside. And so if these interior lug nuts here are torqued down and they keep the wheel held on sufficiently, and then I get these tight but not super torqued, then what that'll do is two things. One, it'll give me the look that I want. And two, these are anti-theft, so it's a little bit of extra protection. There's plenty of bite on these threads. Now, before you scream at me about stacking lug nuts, let's make sure we're all on the same page. The open-ended 45-degree Bassett nuts will be torqued to spec, that's about 100 foot-pounds. Once the wheel's properly mounted, then I'll thread on the black nuts with a dab of blue Loctite and snug them up to about 10 foot-pounds. That's enough to keep them from coming off by hand, and it adds just a little bit of theft protection, but not enough torque to jam or affect the main lug nuts that actually hold the wheel on. It's perfectly safe and purely decorative. And I think that looks way better than open thread. So I'm just gonna go ahead and do that. Pop that on there. Screw that down, not too tight because you don't want to crack the plastic, especially if it's plastic. And there we go. That's what it's going to end up looking like. Although I think in the end, I'm going to end up painting these wheels probably some kind of a bronze or copper color. And I think with these black lug nuts and copper color wheels and maybe a fake bead lock trim ring, I think these are going to look really, really nice. All right, guys, well, there you go. That's how to install an OEM style Ford truck center cap on an aftermarket wheel. Things to keep in mind. Like I said, make sure that you get the center cap centered as possible. Use your spacers, use the lug nuts, get everything in here and mark your holes in the right spots. Make sure that your screws are not too long, because if they are, they will impact in this case, it's a rotor back there. So you want to make sure that you get the right length of screws. If not, you can always trim them like I showed you. Make sure that you use tap oil when you're doing your drilling and your tapping. Just to make sure that you're not binding things up, snapping bits, that kind of stuff. Yeah, just make sure that your aftermarket wheel is going to support a mod like this, depending on its material. These are our aftermarket Steelies, so I mean the Steelies are perfect for this kind of a mod. Any kind of 5 on 5.5 inch Steely should be able to support this. I know the wagon wheels will, the old school Ford rims will. Anything with this big sort of center flat area should take care of it. If you're doing this on aluminum rims, you may want to be a little bit more careful. I haven't done this on aluminum rims. I know it's possible. You just have to follow the same steps and just kind of take your time and be careful with it. So anyway, if you guys have any questions, comments, concerns, gripes, internet ramblings, if you think I did something wrong, if you've got some tips, tricks, or anything else about doing this kind of stuff, let me know in the comments. As always, thank you guys so much for watching, and we will see you next time.
She's rough around the edges, but she's doing fine. Tinkering away, getting things to shine. At Bullnose Fords, she's considered divine. Thanks again for watching.